Hey there, and welcome back to The Explainer. Today, I'm putting on my clinical anatomist hat because we're diving deep into something that honestly frustrates so many of us. We're looking at the actual biological causes behind facial aging and structural breakdown. Specifically, we're getting into myofascial restructuring and kinetic facial toning. It's fascinating stuff.
So let me ask you this. Have you started noticing a bit of progressive sagging or drooping around your lower face and neck? It is incredibly frustrating, and the very first thing most people assume is, oh, it's just a natural part of aging, or maybe it's just some sudden weight gain. But actually, scratch that. I want to challenge that assumption right now. We really need to ask, is it weight gain, or is it an actual structural breakdown happening under the surface? We're going to completely reframe how we look at this. Okay, let's dive into this. Here is our clinical syllabus for today, to shift your paradigm from those cosmetic, skin-deep fixes to real anatomical fitness. We're looking at the anatomy of facial sagging, cortisol and structural decay, the platysma muscle, diet and stretching myths, the kinetic facial toning protocol, and finally, your weekly facial training schedule.
All right, starting with Section 1, the anatomy of facial sagging. This is where we hit our first major paradigm shift about why those popular topical treatments just fail.
Seriously, people spend thousands of dollars on cosmetic creams and these tiny, expensive serums, but why do they so often fail? Well, it's because they only target the outermost layer of the skin. That's it. They completely ignore the underlying fascia, they totally miss the connective tissue breakdown, and they absolutely cannot repair degrading bone structure. As an anatomist, I can tell you for sure, what you're seeing in the mirror, it isn't just a skin issue. It's literally a structural breakdown of the fascia and the muscle underneath.
Moving on to Section 2, cortisol and structural decay. We really need to talk about the hidden biological saboteurs that are actively destroying your facial structure on a cellular level. Yep, we're talking about your stress hormones.
And this brilliantly illustrates what we call cortisol face. You see, the human face is a highly dense sensory organ, and it has an exceptionally high concentration of hormone receptors. When you experience chronic psychological stress, think anxiety, anger, grief, your body releases sustained amounts of the stress hormone cortisol. And this cortisol, it actively degrades your internal protein structures and causes localized fat accumulation. So, quite literally, your psychological stress is eating away at the structural proteins of your face. Wild, right? Since this mental stress accelerates that tissue breakdown, we've got to biologically intervene. Step 1, when you feel that mental or emotional tension, just acknowledge it. Step 2, immediately pair that tension with physical movement. And Step 3, utilize brisk, long walks to systematically clear that excess cortisol out of your system. Brisk walking acts as this necessary physiological mechanism, a biological flush, if you will, that neutralizes the systemic cortisol before it gets the chance to break down your facial structures.
Which brings us to Section 3, the platysma muscle explained. This is the specific anatomical focus we need to target to rebuild things once we've got those stress hormones under control. If you are noticing lower facial sagging or loose neck tissue, the primary culprit here is the platysma. It's a broad, flat muscle that extends vertically from your collarbone all the way up to your jawline. But here is the absolutely critical anatomical key. It's composed almost entirely of fast-twitch muscle fibers. These fibers are designed for rapid, explosive movements. Think speaking, smiling, or gasping. Understanding this fast-twitch composition is a real game-changer for understanding mandibular kinematics and how we can actually rebuild this area.
Let's jump into Section 4, diet and stretching myths. I want to expose two major modern pitfalls that are actively ruining our facial structure every single day.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is that all those static neck stretches you see people doing online, they simply don't work because the platysma is a fast-twitch muscle group. Traditional static stretching, those slow, sustained pulls, they are completely ineffective. To regain structural tone, this muscle fundamentally requires dynamic, rapid contraction impulses. We literally have to train it the way it was anatomically designed to work.
The second pitfall is sitting right on our plates. Our modern diets consist mostly of soft, overly processed foods that require almost zero chewing effort, and that directly weakens our structural integrity over time. Historically, our ancestors ate tough, natural foods that required significant chewing. That constant heavy mechanical stress is what built robust facial bone structure and conditioned the jaw muscles. So, to restore lower facial definition, we absolutely must rethink these dietary habits and recondition those neglected muscles. All right, Section 5, Kinetic Facial Toning Protocol. We are shifting from educational theory right into the actionable biomechanical antidote. Let's get to work.
Here is your master clinical protocol. We're targeting 3 specific anatomical structures here. First, the platysma muscle to tighten the neck wall and lower jawline using explosive myofascial impulses. Second, the pterygoid and masseter to stabilize the mandibular angle. We target that with rebound opening resistance. And finally, the mandibular depressors to adjust symmetry and jaw alignment, which we'll train using anterior mandibular jutting. Let's break down exactly how to do these properly.
Let's move to phase 1, the platysma tightener, and see how this builds. First, you're going to aggressively and rapidly contract the muscles directly underneath your chin and jawline. Pulse the muscle tightly for 10 to 15 rapid, explosive impulses in quick succession, and then rest briefly. Now, you should expect some localized muscle fatigue and soreness here. Don't worry, that is actually a fantastic sign. It indicates deep, fast-twitch fiber activation.
Next up is Phase 2, Rebound Opening Resistance. Place your hand firmly under your chin to create a steady upward counterforce. Then attempt to open your mouth downward, working against your own hand's resistance. You'll perform 10 controlled repetitions of this. This isometric resistance is specifically designed to strengthen the tendons, ligaments, and those deep bone-anchoring structures of the lower face.
And finally, phase 3, anterior mandibular jutting. You're going to push your lower jaw straight forward and outward so your bottom teeth extend smoothly past your upper teeth. Make sure to move through the full range of motion without straining the joint, completing 10 repetitions. This movement is great because it isolates those deep structural stabilizers, effectively pulling the lower jaw forward and lifting that sagging tissue all along the jaw perimeter.
Section 6, Weekly Facial Training Schedule. Now that you know the biomechanics, here is the final prescriptive action plan for beginners to actually implement this into a routine.
So the crucial point here is consistency, and the magic number is 3. You need to perform 3 full sets of 10 to 15 repetitions for each of those 3 movements. And you want to do this several times a week, allowing just a brief 30-second recovery window between your sets. It's this consistent, targeted kinetic stimulation that's going to rebuild that muscular frame, supporting your skin from the inside out.
As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with one final, pretty provocative thought. Will you keep feeding your face soft foods and letting unchecked cortisol accelerate your structural decay? Or will you take immediate biological control, flush out that stress with brisk walking, and start building your structural frame from the inside out using these fast-twitch kinetic principles? The choice and the underlying anatomy is entirely in your hands. Catch you next time.